So the protected audiences API sort of started off its life as an API focused around solving the retargeting problem, but it's become a lot more than that. And I think remarketing will, in the end, be a small part of it.
Is this the year that the GAID goes away? Hello and welcome to Growth Masterminds. My name is John Koetsier. Today we're chatting all about Privacy Sandbox. We know all about the privacy stuff going on iOS, SKAD network, ATT, Scan4, all that stuff. What about Privacy Sandbox? We're not talking quite as much about that. It's kind of at a bit of an in-between stage as well, right? We've heard about it for a few years. We know it's going to be a big deal. We know it's going to reinvent attribution, measurement, and targeting on Android, just like Scan has had a huge impact on iOS. But what does targeting look like under Privacy Sandbox? What does retargeting look like? Today, we're going to chat about that. We're going to talk about the Protected Audiences API. We're going to chat about all the different APIs in Privacy Sandbox and Android. To do that, we have two experts. One of them is from Singular. His name is Omri. He's the head of Privacy Sandbox at Singular. We also have Lucky Harpley, who's a product manager at Remerge. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks, Ivan.
Super pumped to have you guys. Looking forward to this chat. Omri, kick us off. What's new in Privacy Sandbox?
So Privacy Sandbox has I think, very significant year. Has it been publicly named like about 3 years ago? I think what the Android team is planning for 2024 is to focus on integrations and testing and make sure that the industry is ready. We don't have a public GA general availability date yet, but it is looks like it's coming soon, and either end of year or beginning of 2025. And what we're hearing from the Android team is this year is focusing on testing and integrating between all the organizations and all the ad techs in the industry, whether it's ad networks, whether it's MMPs, whether it's actually the advertisers, which all of us will need to do a lot of tech work and product work and make sure that everything is playing good together. It's not an easy thing. And I think that's what we are focusing here in Singular is also here in Remerge.
Okay, cool. Just to put a bit of a pin in that, we heard recently that third-party cookies, they're getting reprieved, right? They're spending another year on death row. I was going to ask, is the GAID going away this year? You kind of said probably not, but of course we don't know for sure. Maybe I'll ask this. Is there any connection between the timeframes on web Privacy Sandbox and mobile Privacy Sandbox?
Quick answer is no. There's not it's not a connected. It is the APIs are pretty much the same. How it works and how all the aggregation service eventually works, and all the ideas for preserving privacy, both cookies and the GAID in web and the Android devices. But it appears that it's going to be slower on the web and obviously and probably faster on the device. And that's why we are in Singular also focusing more on the device end. So I think, the third-party cookies are currently here to stay, but the GAID is here now. I don't see it going away like by end of this year, but it looks like it's pretty close in the next year, and this is why it's important to test and do all the stuff that we're going to talk about.
Absolutely. And then compare your results with Privacy Sandbox versus with the GAID and try and learn from that, all that stuff. Lucky, walk us through the Protected Audiences API. It's something we don't have on the iOS side under Scan, obviously.
Yeah, so the Protected Audiences API sort of started off its life as an API focused around solving the retargeting problem, but it's become a lot more than that. And I think remarketing will, in the end, be a small part of it, because I think of the Protected Audiences API more like a protected auction API. And it has two parts of it, right? There's the Protected Audiences side that it started with. And as of last December, we have the Protected App Signals side of it. Now, the Protected Audiences part is for solving that remarketing problem that allows buyers to join users on the device that they might be interested in remarketing, and using those custom audiences to participate in auctions at a later date for remarketing. On the protected app signals side, it allows buyers or marketers to save signals about the user on the device and use those signals at a later date for user acquisition campaigns. So we have these protected audiences and we have protected app signals, both going through this protected auction system to solve both the retargeting and the user acquisition use case.
That's super, super interesting. Of course, this was called FLEDGE way back in the day, I think. Talk a little bit about that protected apps part that you mentioned. Go a bit more into depth. What would be the use case there? How would that function?
So both the protected audience part and the protected app signals part follow a relatively similar flow. There needs to exist an on-device presence, right? In our case, this is why Remerge has been working with Singular and our other MMP partners to make an action on the device about that user, right? In the protected audiences side, that user is joined to a custom audience, and that information is used later for bidding. And on the protected app signals side, we save information about the user based on various apps that they've been using so that we can use that information in an auction later on. The auctions look pretty much the same, right? We have our supply partners plugged into all the publishers. They start an auction, and depending on whether they want to go the protected audiences or the protected app signals way will depend on whether we go the retargeting or the user acquisition.
So there's so many super interesting components to that. One is, how does this relate to Topics API? Does it take over Topics API? Is it ancillary to Topics API? The other is, you say we save, but it actually gets saved on device, right? And not necessarily fully visible to any advertiser, correct?
Yeah, so I'll answer those in the same order. I think that the Topics API has a somewhat limited shelf life, for lack of a better term. On the Chrome side, we see that the results from the Topics API has been quite underwhelming, right? And people are looking at the Topics API as, yeah, another signal, but it doesn't come close to solving the user acquisition problem like lookalike audiences or these types of mechanisms that were used on the user acquisition side. The Android team, to their credit, has been able to pivot a little bit and then offer this different option in the Android side of the Privacy Sandbox. And so that's why I think that the Topics API by itself, it hasn't proved to be so useful yet. And it seems to be redundant now that we have this other option. Of course, there's a lot of technical hurdles to get past, but there's also a lot of desire from marketers to run effective user acquisition campaigns. So we're expecting especially now that user acquisition's on board, retargeting super important to Remerge, or retargeting first DSP. But there's a lot more interest in user acquisition, right? And so now that we've got protected audiences or the PUBG API supporting user acquisition, we expect to see a lot more adoption. It's a lot more powerful than Topics. So let's see. We'll still be looking at the topics that get sent over, but let's see if they prove to be more than a slightly helpful signal.
I'm oddly happy to hear that, because it must be over a year ago that I dived into Topics API and really looked at the documentation, wrote about it on the Singular blog, and I said, this isn't very powerful. This isn't very predictive. There aren't very many, there isn't a lot of granularity about what people might be interested in or not interested in. And I thought, this is super general. I don't really see how this, so that's really interesting. That's one thought. Second thought is, what a massive blessing in disguise, or not, that Google didn't kill the GAID like last year. Hey, we got Privacy Sandbox. There you go. Throw it out to the world. See what happens. we've had this time to try stuff, test stuff. Oh, shoot, that doesn't work. It doesn't work very well. So here's what we're going to do instead. Super interesting. Omri, can you ping in on that question topics API and the protected app insights API? What do you agree with Lucky? Do you see it trending in a similar direction? Do you see more power there?
Yeah, I agree. I think the topics API, as Lucky mentioned, doesn't offer a lot of power, especially to us as an MMP. Maybe more for ad networks and ad techs similar that, but I don't see it very useful to eventually optimize campaigns or understand who to retarget or not. While the protected app signals does try to solve a problem for UA and to help performing the attribution better and more precise, and then target the exact ad for that user, obviously with preserving privacy without knowing the user, and everything is working on the environment that the Android team developed, which is no GAID, no user identifier, while marketers and advertisers still manage to target the appropriate users for their best result.
Cool. Okay, so we're going to get into the testing that you guys have done, what you've done, how it works, what it looks like, some of the results you've seen, all that stuff. Before we dive there, Omri may take a step back a second and talk a little bit about two things. And Lucky, dive in wherever you want. Two things are, how will targeting work under Privacy Sandbox, and how will retargeting work? So maybe the first one, let's start. I'm a UA manager. I'm coming to Android and looking at Privacy Sandbox, and they go, what will my world look like in this reality? Let's talk about targeting first.
So from the targeting side, I guess there's a few ways that this will exist. There'll always be contextual targeting, right, where we have information about the ad placement, where we can get into a bit of granularity there. And then there'll be the user side, right? And obviously the user side is where we want to have the privacy protected. And that's where we have the different targeting capabilities that are offered by the Android Privacy Sandbox. The first one we touched on is the topics API, which is like a mixture of contextual / user-based. It's contextual user-based information, I guess you could say. But then when it comes into more specific user-based targeting capabilities, that's where the protected audiences API really comes into help. So functionally, at least, I mean, and credit to Google here, at least on the surface level, the functionality offered by the protected audiences API gives a similar functionality to what exists today. It's just wrapped in a very different tech stack, and it's underneath a layer of privacy preserving mechanisms. So that's a very big sort of asterisk there, right?
Yes.
And how obfuscating or how translucent these privacy preserving mechanisms impact the targeting will impact performance, right? So targeting functionality should stay similar-ish, but effectiveness is where we're going to really see the difference.
Cool. And so then walk us through, Omri, if you want, or Lucky, if you want, what will retargeting look like and feel like? How will I do it as a marketer under Privacy Sandbox?
So I'll start and I'll let Lucky continue. But I think like Lucky mentioned before, what Google did plan a very good API in the manner of keeping business as usual while doing some tech stuff, but from the point of view of the marketers, of the advertisers, it will look pretty much the same. So and this is why we also, when we'll talk about exactly how we integrated and which path we Singular as an MMP chose to start and develop, we chose to took the path for working with the network, with the retargeting network, with the redirect approach, when we redirect the responsibility to them. So they'll, as of now, for most advertisers that are running a retargeting campaign, they go to the retargeting network, such as Remerge, and then they run a campaign, and all the data is with all the logic and all the data science is sit on the ad network, on the retargeting network, and then they choose exactly which user they should target, depending obviously on the audience and on the segment and stuff like that. So what Google offered using the protected audiences, and what we developed and tested is to keep this flow as it was, obviously with preserving without knowing the GAID or preserving the privacy mechanism.
And that's where I want to bring Lucky in, because if I was going to do that today or last year or at any point until the GAID is gone, I would come to Lucky and I'd say, hey, here's this group of users, here's this audience, here's these GAIDs that I want to retarget. Now I come to you under Privacy Sandbox, Lucky, and I go like, what do I give you? What do I do?
Yeah, so indeed, that would be one way to run a retargeting campaign. But usually the way we work with our partners is with a live segmentation, right? So our clients, a live segmentation. So they come with us and they describe the type of user that they want to target. We put this into our campaign management system and we segment users on the fly. Every time a bid request comes in, we check if the users belong to those segments and go ahead. So our clients come to us with a description of the type of user that they want to target, and we go and target them. That very short description of retargeting will exist in the Android Privacy Sandbox world as well. It's just the tech that we actually make that happen will be very different. So our clients will come to us, they'll say, hey, we want to target these users. We say, make sure you've got your MMP SDK integrated and updated, and we go on.
Super, super interesting. It reminds me of a comment that a marketer, I think actually a member of an ad tech vendor, said to me when we were doing one of the early webinars on Privacy Sandbox. It says Privacy Sandbox changes much more than SKAd Network does on the iOS side, but it'll have less impact on how marketers actually do their jobs. Because you're basically saying, hey, the mechanisms all change. Under the hood, it's an entirely new engine, but you still turn the key, you still push the gas, you still turn the wheel. That's kind of really good news for marketers.
Yeah, I mean, that new tech, that new tech is going to take, there's going to be growing pains at least, right? Making sure that new tech works, making sure all the pieces talk to each other, not only just making sure that they talk to each other, but then going away and making sure that they're talking to each other as effectively as possible will be a bit of a change. And we've only been talking about up to and including bidding till now. Definitely on the protected audiences side, it really feels like a functionality match to the existing way that it works. On the attribution side, which is your guys' wheelhouse, that's where it gets a little weird, I guess. So that's where it might start impacting advertisers a little bit. And I'd let you guys actually throw in your 2 cents.
I'm pretty sure Omri promised a big red easy button for advertisers. So I know there's a lot of challenge and a lot of difficulty in that, and aggregation servers and aggregation keys and anonymity and lots of other things you got to work through. But I'm hopeful that you can make it fairly easy. We might be able to get to that. Maybe we'll jump into that in a bit. But I do want to get to the key point that we're talking about here is testing. Omri, talk about what you're testing, what you're doing, how it's working, what you're learning.
Cool. So how it works, as like the protected audience says, how it works, very, very high level and simplistic. Obviously, there's tons of APIs and explanation also on the Singular, and obviously, or most of it on the Android side. How it works is everything is being triggered by the device. So let's say an event occur and it arrives from the singular SDK on the device. It arrives to our server. Then we decide. Then we need to understand if we want to trigger an audience or not. Now, in this case, the path that the Singular chose is to pass a decision to the retargeting network, such as Remerge, because they have the most knowledge and most of the segment and all the logic is configured on their side. So what we'll do, we'll redirect the event that occurred to Remerge, and this is what exactly we did in the test. And then Remerge will respond to the device, whether this user, and without knowing the GAID, but with know that the user has an event such as add to cart, and the second time in 2 weeks, or again, everything is really depends on the segment. But let's think of trivial segmentation of an add to cart event. So Remerge will decide, yes, this user needs to be retargeted. So they will respond with appropriate response to the device. And the device will trigger this logic again and will ask Remerge later on, and every other ad network that also chose to participate in this auction, what are the biddings and all the details on the bidding, and then device, and then eventually the device will choose which is the win network, and will present the appropriate on the publisher app. And what we did in the sorry.
Go ahead. No, that's fine.
So what we did in the test was Singular. We developed a beta SDK. It have our SDK with all the new APS and protect audiences and other APIs from the APS into this SDK. We shared it with our partners, also with customers. We're sharing it with everyone who wants to test and integrate. And we shared it with Remerge. They took their test advertiser app and implemented our beta SDK in it, just like mimic a customer and a mutual customer that uses Singular as an MMP and Remerge as a retargeting network. And then we triggered an event, and we saw that it arrives to Singular. We redirected it to Remerge. Remerge respond with the appropriate response to the device, and then we managed to show a render and ad.
Cool. The thing I was going to mention earlier is the device decides who wins the bid. I mean, if like I'm an SSP or a DSP or an exchange or something like that, I'm thinking, okay, how does this all work for me? How does my business change? That's probably above our pay grade right now, but that's something I want to dig into at some point. Lucky, talk about the testing, how it worked from your end.
One of our unique selling points, and pretty much any demand-side platform's unique selling points, is that we don't need an SDK for you to run. You don't need an SDK to run with us, right? On the other hand, with the Android Privacy Sandbox, a lot of the privacy preserving mechanisms mean everything's handled on device or an adjacent trusted execution environment service. That's not so great for those of us that don't have an on-device presence or an SDK, right? Which is why we're working with our MMP partners in order to solve this. So we are able to participate in those on-device auctions through working with our MMP partners, and our joint clients are able to run those retargeting campaigns through this joint alliance. And the test that we did was a very small but important first step that quite manually, but mimics out the flow of how it will work in the future, right? Where Remerge as an SDK-less DSP is able to work with Singular in order to get those users, in order to speak to the devices and have them prepped for running those retargeting campaigns for our clients.
It's super fascinating because in our current world, the device knows nothing except who I am, my GAID, right? My ID. And the ad tech world around knows everything. What you've touched, where you've been, what apps you might have been in, location information, all that stuff. The great revolution of Privacy Sandbox is to completely turn that upside down, essentially. Correct?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, right? Put everything inside the device so, the device keeps its clothes on, right? And everything stays hidden.
Device keeps its clothes on. Excellent. Maybe that's the new title here. I'm not sure. It's fascinating to think about that, how that all works and how targeting and retargeting works, because before, for targeting or retargeting, all you needed is this device ID. There you go. It comes in. You compare that against your internal database, the bigger internal database you have of what this device does, what it looks like, how it behaves, where it is, what time of day, all that stuff. What kind of device it is, high end, low end, that all determine a lot of stuff for your bidding requirements. Now, how does that functionally work, Lucky? I mean, because all the information resides on device. How does it functionally work that you target or
Yeah,
retarget?
so I guess maybe it's not quite that all the information lives on the device, but rather all the information that can track a user across apps lives on the device, right? So,
Okay.
so our advertisers will still be able to track with their MNP partners, right? They just won't know which users are in app A, B, and C, but they'll still know what users are doing inside app A. They'll know what users are doing inside app B and in app C. They just won't be able to connect, right?
Okay.
Retargeting, we need to be able to do that connecting, right? Because we need to find our advertisers' users inside the publisher, right? Two
Yes.
separate apps. So we'll still be able to do a lot of the like inter-app tracking, but not the intra-app tracking. So we'll still have a good idea of what our customers' users are doing, right, in the back end. And then we'll be able to communicate that information into the device, right? So the device knows if this is a valuable user. And then when we see the user again on the publisher side, we won't be able to connect it, but that device knows that it should show this information to the publisher.
Super, super interesting and fairly complex. And I'm thankful that marketers don't have to think too much about that. But what do they have to think about, Omri? How can marketers prepare for this?
So I think marketers should start and take a peek on or a big read. Depends how time they have on the documentation for from the Android team from Google, and first be familiar with the solutions. Let's say the protected audiences is one solution for retargeting. There's the protected app signals, as like you mentioned, for UA, and there's the attribution reporting API, which is, let's say, the equivalent SK network solution from Google for post-install measurement, which, as you mentioned a little bit, there will be a pretty much a big change because the measurement is going to be changed, and it will be more less deterministic and more either data science or measure, depends on a lot of stuff that we won't dive here, probably in next session. But I think marketers first need to understand what's coming, and then they can obviously come to us or to partners such as Remerge, which are very advanced in the APS. Second, what Singular offers is we offer also a beta SDK that our client can implement on their test apps, so they can take a test app and mimic either the option for the protect audiences, but probably marketers will be more interested in the ARA, in the attribution reporting API, to see this. Next, in the upcoming weeks, we plan also to release a test app for partners and clients to be able to test. And I think eventually on the Singular side, not eventually, but later on, like more in terms of month, we plan to release a production SDK version, Android version, which include APS APIs. So our aim is to have clients with our SDK, with their production app that they are running as usual, with GAID live and available, and still will be able to test all those APIs on these devices, while we still have the regular measurement and regular flows. And that will be the best way to both check and validate that we're doing good, and all the all the dots are connected, the partners, the customers, the advertisers, and us as an MMP. And also we'll be able to compare the data, which is all very, very important stuff that once the GAID will be gone, it will be much harder to compare, obviously.
That is really exciting. The ability to have in one SDK, Privacy Sandbox and your GAID workflow, and be able to see that side by side, what's working, what's not working, how well does Privacy Sandbox work, what sort of efficiency impairment might I have under Privacy Sandbox or not. That will be absolutely huge. I have to say, when you started answering that, Omri, I was thinking, wow, this guy really has a high view of human nature. He's asking all the marketers go and read all that documentation. Some will. Exactly. Others will watch this and then they'll come to their MMP or to Remerge or to others and they'll say, hey, what do I need to do? And we'll see how it goes. But probably those who have at least a few people on their team who dive deep into the technical issues will do well off the top. Excellent. I want to thank you guys. I really do appreciate this. It's been a lot of fun and super insightful. Lucky, I feel like there's 50 million more things we need to talk about and understand and how it works. And I want to see like a diagram, a flow diagram where everything goes. And maybe we have some of that, Omri, and maybe we can put that up for the video version of this podcast. That would be super helpful as well. Excellent. Thank you guys. Really do appreciate it.
Pleasure was
Great pleasure.